I interviewed a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. What did it take for him to get to that point? And it is brainwashing. And so the danger of not having initiation is that you have completely extreme cases.
What is initiation then?
A crossing from immaturity to maturity. Part of that crossing is to heal.
There's no difference between being a child and an adult.
I've had 50-year-old men throw immaturity onto the fire. If you want to be stronger, you've got to heal from it. During initiation, there's a descent. And the descent is kind of a tearing apart of your identity. Go into the depth of the darkness and the murkiness of who you are. We get a culture which is no longer afraid of our young men.
I've never had a man listen to me talk about something that happened in my childhood, and he said, I don't know what to do with it.
A lot of guys is that they feel quite weak and powerless. Initiation allows you to mature and see above all of that. Get around the fire, bunch of guys, and start talking.
Hello and welcome to Minds of Men. On today's episode, I'm joined by Ben Price, who's ex-Special Forces, and he's going to be talking to us today about archetypes, rites of passage and initiations which are sorely missing in society. Ben, thank you for being here.
Appreciate you having me on. Minds of Men, like it.
Yeah. You and I have been working in the same field for quite a while now, but we've only really got to know each other over the last kind of year. But really wanted to bring you on just to hear about your experiences and just to show people what kind of work is being done in the UK and what there's a real calling for and what men are lacking, and hopefully just to show them some access to resources and people who are doing some awesome work. So that includes you.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. I think that the big thing that's lacking is obviously initiation, as you said. I think it's the major thing that we need to bring back. And my vision is to one day have everyone as a kid going, when are you going on your initiation? Have you been on your initiation yet? I'm just like looking forward to it and like really valuing it as an experience.
Yeah, 100%. I remember being a kid and always thinking, I can't wait to be an adult because adults have everything sorted out. They know what's going on. And then I remember hitting the age of 23, and it's when I was living in Keswick in the Lake District. And I was walking down the street and I was just thinking, nobody has a clue what's going on. Like nobody has a clue. There's no difference between being a child and an adult. It's all just a bit more about life experience and figuring things out as you go along.
But it totally should be, right? There should be a difference. But you're right. For most of us, there really isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think really exploring like what is this transition point between childhood and adulthood and how do we transition? And many people don't. I'm sure in your work, as I see in my work, I work with people of all ages, all demographics. And so many times I'm just seeing the child in front of me who's still operating an adult body. And there's so much stuff there that they're not consciously aware of, but these old habits and scripts and blueprints, which are just playing out in different ways.
Yeah. And I run, as you know, I run men's camps, and part of the experience is having a fire circle in the evening. And we usually say what we need to say and then throw something onto the fire it's usually just a stick, but then it's with something that you're letting go of. And I've had 50-year-old men throw immaturity onto the fire. So, and because they know once they realize it, they can see how the immaturity is just affecting so much of their life in a big way.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? And I think retreats are such an amazing space. And there's a real misunderstanding around what retreats are. Myself with my company and my colleagues, we've run 14 retreats over the last 3 years. And when men step into that space, there's so many misconceptions around what it is. Is it just a women's yoga retreat? Is it super hippy dippy? Are people going to be howling at the moon, like running naked in the forest? And it's like, no, it's none of that. But there's kind of a little bit of elements of some of that. And it's like, you need to experience it. You need to experience being in a completely different space with men that you've never really spoken to a level of honesty and vulnerability before. And I know a lot of men have trouble with the word vulnerability, but it's actually being real. It's being the most real version of yourself and just opening yourself wide up, which for many of us, like we'd never want to do.
Yeah. I think semantics are important. Because semantics literally means the meaning of words. So I'm quite careful to not use the word retreat, because I know what that conjures up in one's mind. And I know also what an initiation conjures up in most people's minds, and it's not, it's probably not what they think. Like for me, when I first heard that word initiation, I was like, all right, so, you know, when I joined the army, they were like, yeah, you got to down a boot of beer and, you know, and I don't know, silly things that we've done in rugby teams and stuff like that. It's like that kind of what it conjured up. But then as soon as you understand exactly what initiation means, it's like, oh, that's what I'm going there for. I'm not just going there for a relaxing retreat. I'm going there to be initiated.
So break that down. What is initiation then? What does it mean for you in the spaces that you run?
For me, it means a crossing from immaturity to maturity. It means healing. Part of that crossing is to heal your hurts. I think we've all had hurts. We've all been traumatized to one degree or the other. It might not be that you were a child, you know, you weren't, you might, it might not be that you were abused as a child or anything like that, or beaten up, or it might be that. It might just be that you were criticized a lot, or you were humiliated at some point. Could be like real minor stuff. And that wounded child part does need to be healed. It's quite like, I know it sounds hippie to some people, but I'm ex-military. If I can do it, you can do it. If so, I think so. Part of the crossing, part of growing up, part of maturing is healing. And I always use the analogy of there's this Japanese art. I can't remember what it's called, but you smash a pot and you put it together with gold paint. You put it back together, and it's a more beautiful and stronger pot or cup or whatever it is, because of the break, because of the trauma that it had, and because of the repair. So we've all got it. If you want to be stronger, you've got to heal from it. There's no way through it. There's no way around it. There's no avoiding it. It's just the way it is. And
Yeah,
so,
it's kind of those sayings, isn't it? Like forged in fire or trial by fire. You know, actually, when we're put under extreme situations or stress or trauma or conflict, it actually allows us to uncover parts of ourselves and see how we respond. So if I think about some of my experiences, being bullied in high school, coming to terms with who I was, just my own identity, my own sense of self, each of these things were challenging in different ways, but they allowed me to uncover who I was. So understanding what potentially my, what's the word? My reflex, what's it called? Fight responses. You know, so mine's like a freeze and a fawn. That's my natural response. I'd always be quite aloof, quite submissive, just as a way of not being recognized, not being noticed, not drawing people's attention to me. And throughout most of my adult life, it was then actually, how do I develop this stronger sense of self, this confidence, being able to speak in front of people, being able to have an opinion, being able to feel like I belong in different spaces with people that I always saw as more intelligent than me, more masculine than me, more than me in every way. And actually recognizing these initiations or rites of passage can act as a way of accessing different parts of ourselves. And like you said, transitioning from that immaturity to that maturity. And it starts off this whole journey for us.
yeah, and doing it in a conscious way, not in a messy way that you did it, right? And I did it. Like it was, you don't need if you don't need to go through all of the years and years of fucking about. I don't know if we're allowed to swear on here, but I just did. To get to that place, if you had a conscious initiation process or rite of passage or some kind to go through, and you knew that that was what you were going through. Because the other thing is, people argue, well, we've got like scouts and we've got what's the other thing that kids, I did it, Duke of Edinburgh Award and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't know that's what you're doing, and therefore you're not doing it. You're just going on a walk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I agree. I think the actual framing of a space, setting
massive.
people up to prepare in the correct way and recognizing there's a whole intention setting behind this. And also just that sense of eldership and leadership. You know, what's it like to have elders in a community and a family coming together, consciously considering, okay, what do we need to teach these young people? What are the transition points and how are we framing this for them so they actually get the gravity of it? I know in some other cultures, you and I have touched upon this previously. You know, if you think about South African countries where, or just countries in Africa in general, they'll have very intense rites of passage. You know, some boys will be circumcised at that time, others will be put into near-death experiences, some of them will die. And I'm not saying that we should have rites of passage which are like that, but it's pushing boundaries and it's pushing the edges to force somebody into becoming something that they've not been yet. And it's this process of becoming and this process of evolution on your life journey. And I think, like you said, it's really missing.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be a circumcision in public. It can be pretty, you know, it can be a lot more just lighter. It can be it can be a lot lighter than that. But yeah, I mean, part of what happens to us if we don't do it. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I interviewed a suicide bomber in Afghanistan when I was in the military. And it was many years later when I kind of reflected on that, and I was like, I mean, I was intrigued at the time, like, what would it have taken for this guy to strap a bomb on his chest and to go and blow himself up? He obviously didn't do it. That's why I got to speak to him. He got arrested. But it's like, what would it take? What did it take for him to get to that point? And it is brainwashing. It is constant reinforcement of an idea about who they are and why they're here, and it doesn't allow him to think about it for himself. It was like, this is who you are, this is your purpose, this is why you're here. And so the danger of not having initiation is that you have completely extreme cases like somebody becoming a suicide bomber. That's actually the reality. And the less extreme might be that you're chasing a level of success that another boy has given you, right? Who is an influencer online who is uninitiated but has lots of followers. They are kind of, or marketing, like marketing is influence, politics is influence. They're all parents, yeah, 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 exactly. Anyone uninitiated will probably try to sell you something that is for their gain. I would say. Maybe that's unfair, but that that's been my experience. Like when someone's initiated, it's like, no, I actually want you to think for yourself.
Yeah. So as you're saying all that, what comes into my mind is the school system. You know, we're training kids to be good at exams, to be good at retaining information, but we're not necessarily teaching critical thought. You know, what's it like for them to have opinions or to challenge? How are we, you know, like there's so many different avenues that I could go down here. But looking at religion, society, culture, the country that you're born in, all these different things affect our sense of self, our sense of identity, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a husband, a wife, a daughter, all these different roles that we have to fill and meet. And actually, do we get to decide who we are? So most of us inherit our religion from our parents, for example, the language that we speak, the socioeconomic family that we're born into, all these different things shape who we are. But when there's these degrees of separation between who we think we should be and who we actually are, that's where this disconnect happens. So I think what you and I do and other people in this space is actually bridging the gap between those two things so people have a greater sense of identity, a greater sense of autonomy and choice in how they want to lead and live.
100%. And what I say to most of the guys who I work with is everything that you've been focused on in the past has probably been at the level of behavior. So what do I need to do to get the result? What do I need to, so for me, what do I need to do to stop smoking? Oh, you can try this gum. All right, chew the gum. Didn't change. Like I still carry, like it maybe worked for a little while. Oh, you try the vape. Okay, I'll vape. Yeah, the vape broke. Now I'm going back to cigarettes. Oh, you can just avoid it, right? Okay, I'll try and avoid it. Didn't work because in my mind and my identity, I was still a smoker. Now, why did I become a smoker? Because it was cool, you know, and I wanted to be cool, and that was the identity that I adopted at some point, probably because of the influence of my friends. But I was uninitiated, so I just went with the crowd. And the process of undoing that indoctrination is tricky, but not impossible. It's better done. It's better done at 13 when your hormones are kicking in, and like because after the age of 16 we set, and then every year after that we set harder and harder. And so when we're working with a 50-year-old, it's really tough, but it is
It
still
really
possible.
is. Yeah. No, it is possible. I've got clients who are in their 70s and then people I've worked with as young as 18. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Just that kind of mental flexibility, that level of maturity where somebody's able to start having new thoughts, feelings, behaviors, habits. And like you said, in those formative years, we're very much setting a precedent for what our habits are going to be, just
Mm.
like exercise, nutrition, how our body functions, how we operate on sleep, what our level of discipline is. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Being able to really have conscious choice in how you're choosing to live as a teenager is setting you up for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I heard this idea the other day of the familiar zone. We talk about the comfort zone, but actually, some of the things that you do are not comfortable at all. Like if you're in an abusive relationship, that's not comfortable, but people stay in it because it's familiar. It's like it's just what I'm used to. And so if you've got the same a not, I'm going to say non-useful. I don't say good or bad. I try to not use that language, but good or non-useful behavior like porn addiction, alcohol, drugs, drinking. Um, yeah, it just sets at that young age, and the more you become familiar with it, the more you stick with it, the more you become familiar with it, the sometimes the more tricky it is to get out of it.
Yeah, 100%. And then it just becomes a behavior, doesn't it? Just
Well,
these
it becomes an
habits that we have.
identity. It becomes an identity. I am a drinker. I am a smoker. I'm a porn guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot here as well of people not being able to sit with discomfort and,
Mm. No.
differentiating between what's discomfort and what's pain.
Yeah.
Because we're very much a pleasure seeking species. We try and suppress, depress, ignore different things that we're struggling with in our lives. And like you said, we'll use things like drugs, alcohol, porn, food, exercise. And these then become coping behaviors and potentially addictions if it goes beyond a certain point. But recognizing, yeah, who am I becoming? What forms part of my identity? And what do I have the capacity to change?
Yeah, and again, I know I'm kind of looking at all this through the eyes of initiation, but during initiation, there's a descent, and the descent is kind of a tearing apart of your identity. It's like it's very you have to fail. You have to like go into the depth of the darkness and the murkiness of who you are, like the stuff you don't really want to look at. It's very uncomfortable, and the part of initiation is teaching boys. That's a good thing, but we never learn that. So we always think the discomfort is to be avoided at all costs, and then become very comfortable.
Yeah, 100%. And we're not taught about failure.
No,
I was never taught about failure as a child or
yeah,
from my family, from my teachers, from,
yeah.
managers at work. It was always just like, you have to succeed, you have to try
Mm,
harder, do more, be more, have more. And the truth is, you will fail more times in your life than anything else, way more than you'll be successful. But it's understanding that, just like Thomas Edison, like creating the light bulb, he had to go through so many failures before he finally cracked it and got it right. And
mm,
it's realizing, a failure isn't an indicator of you being less than or defective in some way. It's part of the process. It's part of
mm,
life. It's part of learning. It's part of becoming and discovering and creativity. And each piece of data that you get from failure or from not succeeding in some way is information that you can use and you can build on. So
yeah,
that's a big thing that I had to do in my own life is reframe that.
yeah,
This isn't failure. This is just part of the process. I wasn't making another mistake. It's like, okay, this is another point of learning. In hindsight, it is a mistake, but I was giving myself so much grief and so much pressure and had so much negative self-talk around this stuff that I was like, wow, this is really going to defeat me if I keep doing this. I need to completely reframe this. And as soon as I did, massive shift inside of me.
yeah. You're one of the things. Same with me. And um, yeah, I may have made a mistake, but I am not the mistake. My business may have failed, which did happen to me, but I did not fail. My business failed. That's completely different. Not how I saw it. You know. So yeah, again, in initiation, you would learn failure. You would learn that it's okay. You'd learn to celebrate it. And one of the things that is another essential part of that initiation is being in a brotherhood where there are younger men and older men. And I've seen this happen multiple times. But when an older man says something to the younger man about what he sees in them, it's really powerful. It's more powerful than what anything I could say. And that's because young men really are, knowingly or not, craving that attention from older men. And that disconnect, we don't have that connection in the society. So it's beautiful to see that happen. Amazing.
I've witnessed that on a retreat myself. I remember the very first retreat that I went on, which is probably about 5 or 6 years ago now. There was a father and son there, and they've since become friends, and they're going to be coming on the podcast as well at some point.
Nice.
But seeing how those two individuals responded to each other on the retreat, the level of space, the level of regard, was absolutely amazing. And then seeing how they both articulated their own stories and their own journeys, but seeing how other men were responding to each other and then between themselves was one of the most beautiful things.
Yeah,
and
sure.
just the level of emotion just behind it. I remember there was a moment where the father was speaking something to the son that the son had never heard before about the father's past. And the way we were stood in this formation around each other, the son just broke apart from the other guys and hugged his dad. And every single man in that space broke down crying. Just witnessing something like that healed something in every single one of us.
Yeah.
Whatever parent wound we were carrying ourselves, whatever was lacking in our relationship with our own children or in relation to our parents, it struck such a strong chord. And it's so vivid in my memory, just that feeling and what it meant, and just seeing what happened between those two individuals in that moment. It was pure magic.
Yeah, it's amazing. The ideal scenario would be that grandfather, father, and son all came on initiation together, and everyone's kind of moving up a rung in their own. They're all initiating themselves, but they're initiating each other, and yeah. But you need an external. I think you do need an external kind of voice or person there to, because you've got the stuff that you need to have someone navigate with you, I think. But that's amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, can you imagine that? Like just 3 or 4 generations of men,
Yeah.
all just there supporting each other.
But it would have been really normal. Like it's only not normal now, which is the weird part. It's crazy, really, when you think about it.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, the different cultures. You look at like Spain, Greece, France, Italy, you look at the UK, places where it's completely normal for multiple generations to still be living in the same home. In Asian countries as well, I know that's quite a big thing.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate in my childhood to live with my grandparents and my mother up until I was about 10 years old. So I was very much in that kind of multiple generations in one household. Visiting relatives over in Europe, really seeing it even more so there. They'd kind of add on to the side of the house, and when the children grew up, they'd move into the annex, then they'd start getting married and having kids. And it was amazing, just this sense of family, this sense of bonding, this sense of community that happened on a wider scale as well. And like you said, it was all just completely normal. And it still is in many cultures as well.
So where's your family from then?
I'm a real mixed bag. So my grandmother was German,
Right.
but we've got my mother's generation are adopted and fostered. So we've got like lots of different cultures and people and stuff. So I was exposed to a lot of traveling when I was younger, like through Austria, Germany, Bavaria, Slovenia, Slovakia, having relatives in all these different countries,
Cool.
and just being exposed to that a lot as a child.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I think that we are very segregated and disjointed, and I really don't. I mean, I don't see a way of sorting that out other than introducing it at an early age. No one. I think initiation it will, because I think it will solve some really pressing things in society as well, which are happening among boys, which we know about, which is misogyny in schools is like at a record high. Disengaged boys within the school system, male suicide, and then the other thing I was thinking about the other day was anti-Semitic. I don't know if I've said that right, but anti-Jew, anti-Semitic, yeah. anti kind of, yeah. This idea that Jews are the, you know, evil and all this. It's really, I think it's all kind of the same thing, and we're spending a lot of money on trying to raise awareness or help the Jewish community, and I think they've given 7 million to schools to just have. I don't know what they're doing with it, but I have a feeling it's going to be wasted. It's obviously a serious subject, but it would be so much better if they spend that money on initiating boys. And I don't know, maybe it's too sensitive for culture, because we can't be different.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're saying that, what came up for me was, just like sex education in schools, what we're teaching kids around sex and identity and how we communicate. For me, I think the whole sex education system is completely lacking. It's such an old framework. And again, we've got, I think it's less than 20% of male teachers are male, just like in counseling as well and psychotherapy. Like, I think it's less than 25%, less than 20% of psychotherapists are male. So lots of spaces that are missing, positive, mature, emotionally intelligent men being able to communicate with young boys and shape how they are forming and becoming men themselves. So like you said, the program that you just mentioned in relation to misogyny and anti-Jew, it's like, how is that being spent? Is it going to be spent in a way which is actually productive, or is it a tick box exercise? I hear so many people talking negatively about boys and men, and there's some amazing work being done, like absolutely phenomenal work by people that you and I are connected with on LinkedIn and other spaces. And what they are doing as mentors, as coaches, as educators with boys and men, and some amazing charities out there as well, they're actually paving the way. And it's like, these are the people that need like more funding and more airtime to see this is what's actually being done. Because these are the exact people that we need, more people who are positive influences. And when there's that lack, people obviously, or young boys and adults as well, they just go off by themselves and try and find somebody online. And then they find somebody who is rich, sleeps with lots of women, has an amazing house and car. It's like, yeah, dude, who wouldn't want that? Like, I'd love to have some of those things, but it's not teaching them critical thought. And it doesn't mean that these people, Andrew Tate, for example, it doesn't mean that he's 100% a bad person. I think there's a lot of stuff that I don't agree with that he says, but, he's probably got some level of trauma and hurt himself. And some of the things he says are okay. Same with Jordan Peterson. There's stuff that I kind of agree with that he says, other stuff that I really don't agree with. There's people that you and I will work with, they'll agree with some of the things that we say and others that they don't. And that's fine. But it's being able to have that critical thought and apply, this sounds reasonable, this sounds really good, that sounds crazy, or that sounds bad. And actually being able to discern, you can know somebody and not have to agree with every single thing that they do and say, you don't have to follow them.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to this brilliant podcast the other day about politics and brainwashing, and it was really amazing. And one of the things they said was, some people blindly believe, well, a lot of us blindly believe a headline that we see. So, or we have such strong opinions about certain things. Let's take Andrew Tate as a good one because it triggers lots of people. I'll say something about Andrew Tate. I actually did a post about him a while ago. I was like, not everything he says is bad. I kind of said the same thing as you. Some of it's good, but some of it's absolutely mental. And that's the problem. And that's the stuff that's taken out of context. And so many people underneath are like, I can't believe you're talking about this guy being... Because the other thing I said was, if he actually matured if he went through an initiation, he would probably be a great leader for young men. He'd probably be a brilliant leader, but at the moment, it's not having a good effect, right? And people underneath that were like, "I can't believe you said that he would be a good leader for young men." I'm like, "Well, it's not what I said, but because they just saw the word, they were triggered, and then they've got their own brainwashing. There's no critical thought."
But that's it, isn't it? You know, we all carry
Nuance.
these filters of how we perceive the world and how we're able to see things based on our own experiences of trauma or
Yes.
rupture or conflict. And like you said, with sensational headlines or content that we see on social media, it's so easy to kind of get lost in the noise. And, you know, when we're being baited in that way by whoever's running a story or, you know, controlling the media, whatever that is, it's like we're constantly being exposed to that. And like you said, it's a form of brainwashing, isn't it? But before I forget it, what really sticks out for me is what are we doing to have conversations with those young boys and men when they are following somebody like Andrew Tate? You know, are we making complete villains out of them? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, if their own father isn't having an honest conversation with them,
Yeah.
or a grandfather or an uncle or another man in their life, what happens if they don't have any men in their lives? What happens if no one's willing to have an honest conversation with them about sex, about success, about work, about identity, about religion, about beliefs, about shaping who they are? If you've got nobody in your life who's willing to be honest with you and to have an interesting debate around all these different things, if somebody just tells you who you should be, everything that you're doing wrong, and why you're a risk and a danger to society, then of course somebody's going to be completely alienated. Of course they're going
Yeah.
to feel suicidal or abandoned or isolated and
Yeah.
not feel like they've got a sense of belonging.
Yeah. And one of the things that they pointed out on that podcast I was talking about was when somebody identifies as a Trumper, for example, you oh, you're a Trumper, right? Well, yeah, I am. Like I was saying it like it was a bad thing, but now you're hearing it and you're like, no, that's me, yeah, and I'm going to defend my point because you're criticizing me, and I'm going to defend it. So all war starts in the mind. As soon as someone attacks, someone has to defend. As soon as someone defends, it's because someone's, even defense is a kind of a form of war. So it's interesting, and yeah, it sets people even more into that place. And how do you start having the conversations? Well, yeah, just have like get around a fire. It might get around a fire, bunch of guys, and start talking. It doesn't take that much more.
No, it doesn't. And I think, again, setting a scene is why, like, you know, what you do, what I do, and what many others are doing at the moment in the men's work movement kind of world is just creating spaces and framing a space where we can actually come together. You know, like actually just be in community with each other. It doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, black, white, national, immigrant, young, old. It's like we're all human. We all have the capacity for, you know, killing somebody or being incredibly compassionate and kind. You know, we've all got that within us. It's just a matter of degrees, environment, what we've been exposed to, and you know what level of love and care and safety we've had as well. You know, I find it quite amazing, and I don't know if this is because of my own privileged upbringing and the kind of secure attachment that I had, but it boggles my mind, you know, how we just put these labels on, you know, Jews or Muslims or gays or blacks or whites. You know, we segregate. There's so much segregation that happens, and it's like, dude, that person's no different to you. That person's no different to me. Like we are all human beings. You know, we've all got the capacity to feel isolation and loneliness and joy and happiness. It's yeah, I don't know. That's probably just my privilege though, in the way that I've been raised. But there's so much.
Yeah, I think you can look at it through whatever lens. You can look at it through a spiritual lens, which is which might be we're all one. We're all, the law of divine oneness. We are all one. Treat others as you wish to be treated. How many of us really do that all the time? I've just sort of read that the other day, and it was a really good reminder. And I was like, yeah, we all know that. And that's like, it was like the golden rule in this book, A Course in Miracles, great book. And I was like, we really do that all the time? That's a tough one to really sit with, and we all know it, and it makes perfect sense. So that's the spiritual side, or you can look at it through a lens of science. And I watched an evolution documentary the other day, and it's like, yeah, we actually genuinely all evolved from one single cell. So we are literally all brothers and sisters, many times removed, but yeah. And there was the spaceman the other day, wasn't there, who he was up in, I think they did the moon mission, and he was looking down and just like, oh my god, we're just on we're on a marble. We're all on this marble. It's our home there. Like, what on earth are we doing fighting? And
yeah. It's that analogy, isn't it, of like, two different types of ants in a jar, and we're warring with each other, but we don't recognize there's somebody shaking the jar, and we're thinking that we're attacking each other. And it's like,
and I think it's all because it's literally all immaturity. Like the person who is the leader of that group, who is like, I did a marketing seminar, and I wasn't delivering it, I was on it. And I can't remember the guy who he was quoting, but he was like, part of your marketing needs to be that you need to throw a rock at your enemy. Right. So you need to have someone that, your audience can get behind and go, yeah, they're bad. Because then you have like this togetherness, and I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. But but I guess my there is always one, isn't there? I suppose my opposite is immaturity or something like that, or a lack of initiation. I don't know, but it was like, yeah, if you can get your audience angry, it's really good for your marketing. I was like, this is really high level stuff that lots of people are doing, and it's not treating everyone as you would like to be treated. It's really not.
No, yeah, no, I can see why you had issue with that. I would as well. But that's what happens, isn't it? We play on each other's emotions, or marketing, politics, leaders. They do that. They play on the emotions of the populace.
Yeah,
and say, we need to. Yeah.
Got AI now. Focus groups. They do focus groups. They record. Everyone's got a recorder on, and they're looking out for keywords. So when they get the keywords that are emotionally triggering, and then when they're on their campaigns, be it a marketing campaign, be it a political campaign, they're not using their words. They're using the words that they know will trigger. It's all, and then we're just getting better and better at it. And it's kind of like possibly the downfall of democracy, because we're getting better at creating these separate groups. I don't know what comes after democracy. I'm not a politician, but
it's such a huge thing to think about, and it can be very scary, can't it? It just turns into an episode of Black Mirror.
yeah. But yeah, I think the other thing that, just to bring it back to initiation as well, is considering what society gets if we actually go, yeah, we're going to initiate our boys. Like, what do we get? I think obviously we get lower male suicide rates, we get less misogyny, we get more educated boys. But I also think that we get a culture which is no longer afraid of our young men.
Yes.
Like, if you walk past a group of hooded 12-year-olds in the street, like, I personally am like shit myself. I don't think that's just me.
No, I have it as well, and I speak to other people who are exactly the same. It's almost like going past a gang. We make a assumption in our mind, rightly or wrongly. We have a threat response to that as well. That might be based on some of our past experiences. It might be based on, our culture, if we're male, if we're female, if we're black, if we're white, if we're noticeably gay, and how we actually carry ourselves day to day. But yeah,
Jews.
We have that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's actually having a healthier society, like you said, which is more mature, more emotionally intelligent, feels more a greater sense of self, and a positive sense of self as well. I think there's so many young people, male and female, who just don't know who they should be. And it's, somebody who looks a certain way, or has a certain skin tone, or acts and behaves in a certain way, or has a level of confidence or dominance or aggression, And it's like, yeah, you don't need to have any of those things. But all the social media messaging says, yeah, you do. You'll only be acceptable if you'll only get a woman if you're above 6 feet tall. You'll only get a guy if you have a size 8 waist. All these different messages that we're putting out to young people on who they should be. It's why it's gone so crazy with what do you call it? Looks maxing on boys and
Looks maxing.
yeah. So like having surgery, to look a certain way. So the craziest thing that I've heard is boys or men who have completed kind of puberty and they've reached their adult height, and they might be 5'6", 7, 8, 9, and they're going to surgically get their legs broken and then be made like up to 6 inches taller, with the view of being more attractive to women.
Wow. Really? I literally cannot believe that's true. That is wild.
Wild, and
Yeah.
I think so many of us really think that things like anorexia and bulimia are only things that affect women and girls, but it's not true. So many young lads are affected by eating disorders, body dysmorphia. I used to see it when I was a personal trainer. Back when I was living and working in Australia, doing my training out there, like so many PTs and class instructors I knew had either an eating disorder or body dysmorphia in some way. And we see it all the time with young boys now, having to have a certain amount of muscle mass or a certain penis size, or, have a certain level of tan skin, tattoos, whatever it is. We have to look and be a certain way in order to be acceptable and to be desirable.
Yeah. And I think the filter is, if someone's trying to sell me something to get those things, then maybe I need to just question.
Yeah,
if that's true.
Yeah. But again, I think with all of this, we're looking from the inside we're looking from the inside out, and we're listening and processing everything from the outside world and making those decisions. And I think as a society and as a culture, we're not taught just to listen to ourselves. Actually, what's it like to have a sense of peace or silence or solitude? What's it like to think about different philosophies, different ideas, different concepts, to develop this sense of self, this sense of identity? So circling back to what you were saying about the initiated, going through this rite of passage, actually, we're cultivating people who have a greater sense of identity and a greater sense of peace with who they are and how they can operate in the world. And the ripple effect of that through society is huge. I'm sure you would have seen it. I've seen it countless times on the retreats and stuff that we've done, where we'll run a weekend retreat, we'll do a certain level of week's integration afterwards, and we'll get guys messaging us saying, oh my God, like my wife has said, what did we do on the retreat? She said, because I'm a completely different guy. I remember having one guy messaging me 3 days after the retreat. He'd gone out with his wife and kids to the pub for a nice meal, and he said he just broke down in the pub crying. And his wife was like, I've never seen you cry. She's like, what's up? And he's like, I really miss the guys. It's like, what do you she said, you only just met them. She's like, what are you talking about? She's like, these strangers, these strangers are making you cry. And he's like, you don't understand. It's like, I've never spoken to a man like that before. Yeah. I've never had a man hug me, or I've never had a man listen to me talk about something that happened in my childhood. And he said, I don't know what to do with it. It's completely transforming some people's lives to realize that they can be in relationship or in community with men or women or other people in a completely different way that they've never experienced before.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I mean, you have never really met anyone unless you've kind of done one of these experiences. I don't think, unless you're fortunate to have a really authentic, like genuinely authentic group of guys around you who are friends, and you just happen. But yeah, I don't think most men have never really met another man. That's really sad. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently is how damaging banter is. And I've been in the military, so much banter. And banter can happen. Like, banter can be a good thing. Like, if you and I were to meet up and sit around the fire, I'm sure we would have some banter. And we'd probably take the piss out of each other a little bit. But we wouldn't do that without the deeper stuff. I think whenever I've done that with a friend now, it's like we've had a deep conversation about something, and then we'll also make a joke about it.
Yeah.
But we would not just make a joke about it.
Yeah. I think banter is such a fascinating thing as well. I really do. And I think it speaks to the ways that men are in relationship and are taught to be in relationship with each other. We don't know how to receive each other's either vulnerability or authenticity or the real self. We don't know how to, just be in relationship with each other. So if somebody's disclosing something to you and you've never had that from a man before, you might offer a solution. You might try and solve a problem for them. You might try and give them advice.
Yeah.
Or if you really don't know what to do, you diminish it with banter. And then you shut it down and you laugh it off, and then the guy shuts down even more.
Yeah. Two most damaging things for a man: humiliation and rejection.
Yeah, massive. Yeah, for anybody. It's unreal.
Yeah.
And it's so isolating. It really, really is. I'm sure you've experienced it, I've experienced it, most people have to some degree. But just that sense of not being allowed to talk about something or explore something. And this is what absolutely blows my mind, is we don't have to have the answer to any of this, because the answer is presence. All we have to do is be present and give our attention. And it's enough to give silence and just to listen to somebody. And for somebody just to feel listened to, for somebody just to feel important enough that one person will fucking listen to them and take them seriously and see them and just acknowledge that they're struggling in some way. That's pretty much it.
Yep.
If somebody treats you with that. I remember a friend of mine who was struggling with something, was staying over at mine one night, and we'd been having a drink and stuff and just chilling out, and we went outside so we could have a cigarette. And this dude just had the weight of the world on his shoulders, just because he felt so isolated and so alone and hadn't had a relationship for a number of years. And I think was it through COVID? No, it wasn't. It was a few years before COVID. I was just thinking about contact. And at one point I just reached out, and we just sat on the back doorstep, and I just reached out and I just put my hand on his back and I just rubbed his back. And I just felt his entire body start to relax. And I think it was a few weeks later, he just messaged me and said, mate, I can't tell you how much I didn't realize I needed another human being to touch me. He said, I've just not been touched in such a long time. And I just needed some physical contact, and just putting your hand on somebody's back, just relieving the weight of the world on the shoulders, just being human with each other. And I think I'm fascinated by touch, and it's a big thing that we're starting to explore, in the work that we do in our spaces. And what is nurturing touch, what is non-sexualized touch, and what is touch between men. And I think there's such a lack of it. And I think a lot of people try and get that filled with sex because it's seen as something which is acceptable for men to do, but not to have nurturing touch like a hug or rubbing a back or rubbing somebody's feet or, just lying across somebody on the sofa. And, guys aren't necessarily going to do those things, some of those things with each other, but they might, and you look at cultures like Italy, male friends will hold hands walking down the street. You look at it in Greece as well. There's a lot of physical touch that takes place, and it's completely normal. We're human. We're hardwired for touch.
Where did we lose that? Because my son is very, he's very very huggy. He'll hold hands with other boys. He's 2 years old. There's no, oh, this is weird about it.
Yeah, I think it starts to happen as we transition from primary school to high school and around the age of puberty, and start seeing what's socially acceptable. And when you start seeing that transition point coming in, and things like, oh, don't be gay, mate, or that's gay, mate, what are you doing? So I remember this book, I think it was called Better Boys, Better Men, an American author. It's a fantastic book. It could be quite triggering for a lot of people because it talks about initiations and things like hazing in universities and colleges and stuff like that. It's a fascinating book. It's incredibly insightful. It quotes research papers as well. But in there, it talks about the language that we use to shape young people, boys, girls, daddy's little princess, daddy's little soldier, how we're shaping young people emotionally as to what is and isn't acceptable. So in the book, it actually says, boys are actually generally more emotionally intelligent than young girls are, from like a baby to toddler to young child. Wow. So in that developmental stages, boys are generally more sensitive and more receptive to the emotions of those people around them, whereas girls might be more independent and a bit more fiercer. And then seeing how that changes as you go through stages of development. So linking it back to what you were saying, when do we lose that? Where are the spaces where is it then acceptable? So things like hockey or rugby or football, where you can have like jostling or roughhousing, and then those are acceptable forms. But then we see it, and I've spoken about this with another friend, he saw it a lot in spaces where guys will get drunk together and then almost becoming like super gay or super homoerotic, where like dry humping each other or getting each other's dicks out or pretending to jerk each other off and doing like crazy stuff. And it's like, why are they going to that extreme? And I think it's because they're lacking a level of intimacy, which is non-sexual, that they're craving from other men. And it's like fascinating. You look at all these people that play jiu-jitsu or do some level of martial arts. I follow a couple of jiu-jitsu accounts. I don't play it. I'm just there for the aesthetics. But looking at these guys, and they're getting into these positions, and it's like, dude, that looks gay. That looks totally gay. Like, you've got your nose buried up somebody else's guy's ass. Yeah, it's like, what are you doing? But, and I spoke about this with another guy, actually, another guest on a podcast. I was saying, is it because you crave a level of touch with men that's acceptable in that arena, but not acceptable day to day? And he was really stumped by it. And it's a great point of reflection. Where are we missing contact as men? And what do we need?
It is. Yeah. I don't think it's a conscious. I think it's a subconscious. And I was just thinking, as you were saying, I guess because it's not been okay to be gay, like really not okay in not too far away in history, that you would do anything to make sure that you were not seen as that. So I wonder if that's where that must be where it came from.
What they're
like, don't be gay, and like, I'm not doing anything which might be construed as being gay, like including touching other guys and including holding hands.
Yeah, absolutely. Got you. So you're saying that just with that connotation of, if you do want to spend time with a man, if you want to touch another man, then the fallout of that, of being labeled as gay or other or it's just going to marginalize you in a massive way. And we still see it today in a big way as well. In some ways, there's all this progress that has been made in relation to like LGBTQ, but in other ways, it's still there. It's better than it was, but in some places it isn't. And that's the reality of everything. Just like, attitudes towards Jews, Muslims, immigrants. There's always going to be this level of negativity and disregard for.
The one thing that was actually quite useful, I can't remember where I heard this, but I often find myself going, back in the day, I'm sure everyone got initiated and it was amazing. Obviously it wasn't. And I think you're right. It is something that we've always struggled with as a society, as humans, is like to the maturity of our boys and men. That is something that's always been present, always been a struggle. But I don't believe it's unfixable. I don't believe it's beyond repair either.
Yeah, of course not.
Imagine if our world leaders were themselves initiated and were encouraging that as a concept. They would solve so many things.
Yeah. Can you imagine? God, I'm just running through like all the politicians now that we've had and prime ministers, and
not one do I look at and go, yeah, because as you know, I'm a big fan of the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover framework, and for anyone who's not familiar with it, it's a great book, and the name of my initiation is called The Kingmaker. But not one of them do I look at and go, that's a real king there. Like that can be triggering as well. I should probably explain what that means. But The king is not a tyrant, and he's not weak either.
Yeah, so for people that don't understand this, these are masculine archetypes that we're talking about, and they each represent different aspects of human nature. And there's positive aspects, and then there's the shadow aspects, like the negative stuff as well. So, yeah.
King.
So when you're talking about the kingmaker, go more into that.
Yeah. Well, so the king is the leader. He is the fair one. His presence is generative, not, it's not the opposite. Whereas so the shadow, which there is a more complicated model where you have the immature version and the mature version, but I just use the mature king, the immature shadows, which is the one shadow is the tyrant, which ironically, and what I think happens, and then the other shadow is the weakling. What I think happens with a lot of guys is that they feel quite weak and powerless, completely powerless, and they see the tyrants who appear to be strong and may get some results also for a short amount of time. And so they go over there and then they get burnt and their confidence gets knocked and then they end up back to going to weak and then they go back to tyrant. And I think that it is. And the initiation allows you to mature and see above all of that. The ironic part about the tyrant is, let's say you're an entrepreneur. Most of the guys I work with are business owners, entrepreneurs. They will go to tyrant. They're like, right, crack the whip. Let's get some KPIs in. Let's like make sure everyone's held accountable. And if you don't, you're going to get sacked. And they'll use fear as a tool, and it will work for about, I don't know, 90 days, depending on your team. But eventually your team starts leaving and you have other problems. But because it worked before, you think it's going to work again. So you get harder. And the other thing that's interesting is that's kind of the only emotion that men are socially allowed to socially allowed to express, which is rage or anger. We're kind of okay with showing that as men. So there is the king.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Feeling into what emotions and what behaviors are acceptable or socially acceptable or what we've been conditioned to believe. But actually, when we start doing the work, when we have a level of real emotional maturity and even vulnerability with our staff in a situationally aware way, where we're not emotionally dumping or we're not being emotionally manipulative with people, it's actually, we provide safety. This is what safety in the workplace looks like, because somebody feels, oh, I've got a manager who's mature, who's articulate, who is situationally aware to recognize, yeah, I'm dealing with all these pressures at home. I've got this pressure at work to meet this deadline or to have this fundraising come in. And it's like, actually, here's not somebody who's trying to dominate me or crush me or completely overwhelm me. He recognizes all these different things that I'm dealing with. We still have the expectation that we need to do work and meet these KPIs, but there's a level of humanity in just how you're showing up as a leader, as a manager, as a business owner, and recognizing that you're going to have your own pressures. But actually, what's the vision that you're creating? What's the culture that you're cultivating? And how aware of that are you?
Yeah. It's the mature leader, because he's not so weak that he's going to allow you to not get to the KPI either. But he will. One of the first things that I teach when the guys show up at the men's camps is the levels of listening, and it kind of ties into what you said earlier about half the time you just listening and presence is enough for something to shift.
Yeah.
And those levels of listening really are very useful. And if you nail it, you become a safe man.
Yeah.
And when people feel safe around you, they can then express whatever they need to express. They won't withhold critical information because they're not scared of telling you something where you're going to go absolutely mental at them off the rails. That critical information could be, yeah, we've got a serious problem in the business, or like, yeah, by the way, we probably shouldn't invade Iran because of blah blah blah. Don't know why I said that one. So they don't tell you what you need to hear; they tell you what you want to hear, um, and you have to be really safe. And there's an acronym that kind of goes with that. But go on. Oh, okay, well, the acronym is S is silence, 3 second rule. A is to acknowledge, which I think is a very kingly trait, to acknowledge people, to acknowledge their good work. What is appreciated appreciates, and what is the opposite can be true. And that goes with relationships, that goes with money, that goes with your health. So A is to acknowledge what someone said, and then F is the feel or the frame. So what might they feel about what they've just said? Oh, your dad has taken his own life. You must feel really sad. And even if you're wrong about your assessment about how they feel, it doesn't matter because they'll just go, no, I don't feel sad. I feel angry.
Yeah.
So F is feel, and then E is to explore, and you ask a question about what they've said, not how it relates to you. Not like, oh yeah, my dad took his own life too. Like, oh, how you navigating the funeral. I don't know, just something about this situation. But it's amazing what that framework, super simple, safe, makes you safe, and you can uncover all sorts of stuff, and they feel, and then you create connection. I struggle with that because, like you said earlier, we're trying to fix things, or we're trying to what are we trying to do? We're trying to fix or problem solve. Yeah, how it relates to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that acronym. That's brilliant. Yeah. Presence and awareness, it's huge, isn't it? I think that feeds into like feedback for me. So many of us don't know how to take feedback. I didn't for the longest point of my life. I was so fearful of feedback, of just thinking I was constantly doing things wrong or in a stupid way or just not being intelligent enough. And I love feedback. And I've really changed my relationship with it over the last kind of 30 years, which is mad to say. But I don't think most people can take feedback. We don't know how to take it. Going back to the language that you were saying before, I am depressed or I'm a failure or I failed at this. Language is so important with feedback as well. It doesn't mean that you're wrong or that you're fundamentally wrong as a human being and you're not acceptable. It means you did something that might not be acceptable, or you did something that wasn't appropriate, or you crossed a boundary, or you made a mistake in some way. But it doesn't mean that you're deficient. It just means, oh, there's an area for improvement. And just actually changing your relationship with it is huge. But I hear it all the time, similar to you, the guys I work with, the managers, the leaders, the business owners are trying to give feedback in their company. Number one, are they doing it in a way which is healthy and accurate and communicative and allows for growth and expansion? Or are they doing it in a way which is really diminishing the person? That's the first issue. And then the second issue is how somebody receiving that. Do they have the level of maturity and awareness to be able to take the feedback on board, or are they getting triggered by it and then going off sick for a month? Yeah. And I hear plenty of stories across the spectrum.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things my coach said to me, and I say all the time now, is we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And that was such a mind bender for me, because I think this specific scenario was something to do with my dad. I think I was like pissed off at him for something. And he asked me a load of stuff about him. And then he said, what did he do for you? And I was like, oh, I've never even really, I've never really thought about that. Because I'm always thinking about the other stuff, like what he didn't do, how he was critical. I never really, like, yeah, I know that he was there and like provided and stuff like that, but I never really thought about what he actually did. And it was just such a moment where I was like, yeah, that's all I'm seeing. It's the lens I'm seeing things through. And that was my part of my wounding.
Yeah.
Also,
but it goes to show like how we get stuck, isn't it? Stuck in thought loops or stuck in stories, whether they're it doesn't matter like if they're true or if we remember them differently, but we get stuck when there's a wound that hasn't healed, or we don't know how to articulate it, or we've never been given the space to explore it.
Yeah, 100%. And it doesn't take that much to heal from it. It just requires courage. And I was very lucky to learn that in the military, really. Some of the good things that came out of the military, that was one of them. The courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I think maybe the shadow, everything has a shadow. The shadow of courage is completely ignoring your feelings, but and getting on with stuff. But that's also the shadow of the warrior, which is the sadist. So yeah, you can feel the fear and do it anyway, and that includes investigating your shadows. That includes having those uncomfortable conversations, all the stuff we've spoken about today, all the things that trigger you, that threaten who you are. Really.
Yeah, 100%. Shadow work is such a huge area. Our business partner Billy, like he's huge on shadow work. He absolutely loves it. He's been researching it and developing it and teaching about it for so many years now. And it is just this huge font that you can explore, which just gives you so much information about yourself. Your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, how you see yourself, how you see the world. And if it's something that you choose to delve into, it can give you such a huge area of growth and expansion. It really can.
Yeah, I totally agree. And going back to why we were talking about this, which was the feedback thing. My coach, he got me to do a 360 review, and the people who are in business might, like in corporations, you probably have heard of that, but I'd never heard of it. And so this was where I went out and I got feedback about me. Two people I didn't know, two people I kind of knew well, and two people who I knew really well. I was fucking terrified. I really didn't want to do it, but I did it, and the feedback wasn't all bad. Right? You might actually get really good feedback, and that's really nice. So I got some good stuff. I got some like, as in, I got some stuff that I needed to work on, but I also got some really lovely things, and I wasn't seeing them. So my lens changed by doing that. And you do need other people's thoughts and opinions, not just your coaches. I think you do need other people as well.
Yeah, 100%. We do. We need that challenge and that growth and that exposure to different people, different environments, which are able to nurture, develop, challenge in lots of different ways. I did the same thing back in 2019. I was really struggling with who I was and where I was in life and who I needed to be. And I did the same thing. I reached out to loads of different people and just said, why are we friends?
Oh, right. Yeah, nice.
Why do we spend time together? What is it that you see in me? I need to get some feedback because I just don't trust myself at the moment, or I just don't really have a positive sense of self, And I recognized that I wasn't necessarily a bad guy, but I just had such low self-worth at the time that I was thinking, what's the point of my life kind of thing. And not being suicidal, but really considering who I was and how I was operating and what my place was in the world. And it really helped. Really, really, really helped to just have that feedback. And, lots of stuff was positive, lots of stuff which gave me time to pause and consider things that I wanted to change, things that I needed to let go of, areas that I was able to actually look at and be proud of, because I wasn't able to acknowledge all the good stuff and my successes as well. That's another thing as well. Like, I don't think we know as men how to celebrate success and how to sit with success and to acknowledge it, because we're constantly taught to strive, have more, do more, be more. Actually, what's it like to feel a sense of achievement and accomplishment and gratitude for everything that you do have without needing to have more and be more?
It's hilarious. Or, well, it's not hilarious, but it's like that shows up all the time. I had a client yesterday. He was like, he'd just been broke for quite a while, finally got a job, got paid quite a lot of money, 75K or something. So he was suddenly like got a bit of money again, and he was like, I don't feel any joy, and I was like, no shit. You know, A, this was never going to bring you joy anyway, but B, you haven't even recognized it. You haven't even, you haven't really celebrated it. Um, so we went through, and I don't know if I already said this today, but because I recorded a video before we came on about this, and most people make lists about their wins if they do it at all. 'Cause I've been to loads of entrepreneurs coaching things, and one of the things I like to do is like celebrate your wins. So you make your lists. This went well, that went well, or great gratitude, grateful for this, grateful for that. That's great. That's like level one. Level two is, what does it say about who you are? And when you do that, you're building a body of evidence for your greatness,
Yeah, dude.
and you're reinforcing who you really are. And I'd say level three is doing it around a fire, and then and this is what we do: we get the other guys to say what they see in that man, and that's unbelievable. And it made me really realize how little we compliment each other as men. So if you're listening to the podcast, my challenge to you is go out and make a compliment, because you're creating a like a butterfly. There's a butterfly effect, if you've heard that book, that phrase. One compliment makes someone feel good. They feel good. They say something nice to someone else, and that ripple just continues, and a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And again, seeing it so much in the spaces that we've run. And it's so powerful just to acknowledge it. I see it as well with clients that I work with in relation to their children. And they're like, oh God, he's doing this, it pisses me off. They're doing that, that pisses me off. It's like raising Kevin and Perry. How much of this is a behavior issue? How much of it is just being a teenager? How much is it of them becoming a dickhead? And it's like, dude, when was the last time you told your child that you were proud of them?
Yeah.
When was the last time that you told them that you loved them without them needing to do anything, without them needing to get a grade A, without them needing to wash the dishes? When was the last time you sat down and said, you know that I love you, don't you? You know that I'm proud of you, not for what you achieve, not for what you do, but because you're mine. And because I see the person that you're becoming with each passing day, and I love you and I'm proud of you. And for anybody to receive that, it's huge. But we forget, because we're just trying to do our best as humans, as adults, as parents. But we kind of lose sight of what's right in front of us. And it's these beautiful little moments of just acknowledgement and giving somebody a compliment or some praise. So I love that. I love the fact that you said that, go out there, look at the men who are in your life and give them a compliment of something which is true. Their behavior, their actions, how they make you feel, what kind of a friend, husband, father, brother they are, and what they mean to you, and just share that with them.
Yeah, and know that you have been. There's nothing wrong with you. Like, you've just been conditioned to the opposite, because especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're good at seeing the gaps. That's why you're in business, or you're a leader, whatever it is. Like, somebody who's ambitious, you probably are there because you see the gaps and you went to fix them, and then you got really good at it, and now you see all the fucking gaps, and now it's like, now I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling fearful. So it's not that you're broken, it's just that, like you said, Christian, we've been conditioned to strive as men. We've been conditioned, like, what if you're looking at self-help stuff, it's kind of everywhere. If you're in that sphere, if you listen to loads of podcasts, you're going to get lots of actions, lots of to-dos. But actually, yeah, one of your to-dos can just be to look at how well you're doing, and what does that mean about who you are. And that's such a powerful practice. And I think the other practice that goes hand in hand with that is forgiveness, which we haven't really spoken about. But forgiveness is bloody huge, and every religion talks about it. It's like, I think of it as like a judgment is the opposite of forgiveness. So a judgment is like a piece of poo on your windscreen, and the more judgments you've got on your windscreen, the harder it is to see out the windscreen.
Yeah.
You're seeing a very murky picture of the world, and you're missing things. And the only way to clean the windscreen really is forgiveness. And forgiveness can't even, you can't force it. You have to. There's various different processes, but just know that forgiveness is amazing. Forgive self forgiveness, forgiveness for others. Yeah, massive.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you've mentioned that, because forgiveness is so huge and it's so complex as well. You know, we've got these words like love or anger or shame or resentment or forgiveness, and we have these simple words to describe them. But the reality of living it, of trying to forgive somebody, of trying to process anger or grief or a wrongdoing or a broken trust, my God, it can take years, you know. And for some people, I've had this conversation, a similar conversation with people before, where is it right to forgive some things, you know, some traumas or some betrayals? And, you know, it's a huge debate that you can have. And I think it's unique to each individual, and there's pros and cons to both. But speaking from my own lived experience of how long it's taken me to forgive somebody and to work through something, you know, which is either a broken trust or a ruptured boundary. And, you know, one of those instances took me 3 years, you know, to work through it and sit with it, not to try to depress it or depress it or try and cover it up with a coping mechanism of some kind, but to actually sit with it and feel it, but not to get lost in a pit of despair, but to sit with the feeling and the emotion of discomfort and of rupture, and to allow it to be, and to move through the body, to move through your nervous system, and to sit with the thoughts, the feelings. And obviously, we all want things to be healed and resolved in the fastest time possible. But again, it's that expectation of wanting something to be something it isn't. And actually, can we accept what is? And when we can accept it and start to feel it, we start to process it. So this idea of forgiving somebody is like, it's not this instantaneous thing. It might be by 1 degree every week for 5 years. Or it might be other instances where you have a big shift and, oh, actually, I can let go of 50% of this now, or I can let go of 1% of this. And it might happen in stages. So recognizing these different concepts or ideas or emotions, they may have been framed in a certain way for you, but actually it might not be right. And there's different ways of exploring things and allowing yourself to sit with them and explore them.
Yeah, definitely. I think a big part of it is to be heard as well.
Yeah.
Like, I think if anyone, maybe it's just me, but when I did hear about forgiveness and I realized how important it was, I was like going around trying to forgive everything and just gaslighting me, gaslighting myself, saying, "Yeah, I've forgiven you." Really, I fucking hate your guts, and I really feel you betrayed me, actually. But um, yeah, I think then it was like, no, you actually do need to be heard. How you can be angry at people, and you can be angry at life, and you can be angry at God, and you can be angry at um, whoever you want to be angry at. You just don't need to stay there.
Yeah.
And well, I think whatever it makes it feel real. You've arrived when you're truly grateful, not just faking it.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of a lady called Maya Angelou?
No.
She is was an American lady, a poet, a writer, I think women's and I think a black activist as well. And what was it she said? Oh, it's just gone straight out of my head. I've listened to a lot of her stuff. I fully recommend you check her out online. She's written loads of books, loads of poetry, done public speaking, and so much of what she says around forgiveness and being thankful for all the things that happen to you. So even all the bad stuff, this is a lady who was raped when she was younger, and recognizing that you can either be a victim or you can heal from things, and having this deep sense of gratitude for everything that happens for you in life. And she articulates it in a much more profound and beautiful way than I ever could. But hearing her speak about actually the things that happen to us, they shape us and they help us grow. And we all make mistakes. We're all going to do bad things in our lives, or things that we're ashamed or embarrassed or guilty from. But actually, when we know better, we can do better. Mm-hmm. And it's this process of learning and becoming and growing, and accepting that.
Yeah, nice. I call it hostage negotiation as well. Releasing the hostages.
Yeah, love that.
The hostage is anyone you wrapped up in judgment, including yourself.
Yeah, dude.
And it's just that poo.
What an image. As you said that, I just imagined like holding hostages inside your body. Yeah. These are people that have wronged us, emotions that we feel that we trap and suppress, or we sit with and we nurture.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, wow, we've got all these hostages inside ourselves that we're holding on to instead of letting them.
And you know what happens if you hold on to them too long? Disease, illness, fatigue. It's fucking tiring holding a lot of hostages.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing as well, like people's trauma responses, when we do hold on to stuff. The amount of clients that I've worked with who have various illnesses or ailments of some kind because they're just holding these trapped emotions, these trapped traumas, and starting to recognize what your own trauma responses are. And so for me, for example, headaches, migraines, I'll clench my jaw, I'll swallow my emotions. So lots of tension around my head, jaw, and throat area. For some people, it's irritable bowel syndrome. It's leaky gut. For other people, it might be joint pain. It might be symptoms of like ME or MS. So starting to recognize, and it's not always the case, but thinking, okay, if I have certain ailments, when do they show up? Is it when I'm not being my authentic self? Is it when I'm not communicating a boundary that's been overstepped? Is it when I'm not communicating what my needs are or respecting myself in a certain way? And then you start to have these flare-ups of different physical conditions.
Yeah. I first came into contact with all this because I was a massage therapist. I was a personal trainer and owned a gym, and I was also a massage therapist. And I'd do a massage on one person and they'd be like, oh, it's amazing. I feel great. Thank you so much. And then I'd do it on someone else and it'd just be like, nothing. Just like, am I a really shit massage therapist? Because I did a great job on that guy. And then on this person, nothing. And I started to realize that, the people who weren't getting any real results, I mean, they would say they felt better, but I would always be interested in improving range of motion, in like, healing some back pain or whatever. I realized they were just super stressed people. And when you have the conversation with them about what's going on in their life, there's often something. And I think you're right. It's not exclusively that. It can just be that you sit in a chair all day and you've got bad back because of that. But it's still interesting how some people do sit in a chair all day and don't seem to get a bad back.
Yeah.
How's that happen?
Yeah. Listening to you say that, it kind of highlights as well, another thing that I see is how many men are disconnected from their bodies. So they won't recognize that there is trauma or there's a lack of sensation, or they won't see a correlation between what's happening in their mind, emotionally, spiritually, and what is actually happening in their body. And not knowing how to name an emotion or name a heaviness that they feel, or a fluttering in their stomach, or a tightness in their chest, or a rapid heart rate. It's just like, oh yeah, that's just nothing. It's just the body in it.
Yeah.
They'll completely disconnect their mind from their body.
Yeah. Well, one of the you may or may disagree with this, but one of the issues that most men have with therapy is that they get asked how they feel and they have no fucking idea. And so when my coach asked me something about how I felt about this situation, I was just like, oh, a bit anxious maybe. And it was just because I just hadn't really registered what was going on. And he brought up yeah, no, I didn't know how it was. I was like neutral. I was like, I don't feel anything. And he was like, brought up this feeling chart, emotional wheel, which I now
Yep.
use all the time with my guys. And he was like, point to the emotion. I was like, oh yeah, maybe a little bit anxiety. And he was like, yeah, well, that's fear. You're experiencing fear. And I was like, yeah, yeah, you're right. I am experiencing fear. And then the other thing that helped me was just doing a bit of breath work and just like tuning in to the experience of the sensation. So if the word feeling doesn't resonate, the words experience or sensation is quite a useful alternative. And I
Yeah.
often find that lands, and we often find stuff and connect with it.
Yeah.
But it's also a
Yeah.
superpower I think that guys have. It's like a useful thing because if you need to get on and do something, you do need to like ignore your feelings a little bit and do it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
We talk about men being single-minded and women being good at multitasking, but that kind of single-mindedness can really carry us through. But what I do see is
too much of that.
just like you've got, yeah, is people trying to operate at this level, constantly, without end. So it's recognizing like professional athletes or Olympians, for example, they'll have these periods of high training, high intensity. Then they've got the race coming up or the competition. Then they're going to execute on what they need to do. And then they'll have a rest period. Then they'll have downtime. Then they'll have recovery, repair, sleep, nutrition, massage, whatever it is. And they go through highs and lows over the course of a 12-month period or a 3-year period, depending on what the thing is. But people in business, and particular founders, owners, and entrepreneurs, they have no downtime whatsoever.
True.
And you and I know this with the businesses that we run. What it's like to constantly feel the pressure of money, finances, clients, growth, expansion, social media, content creation, family, kids, taxes. It's all part of the process. But we have to give ourselves permission in how we navigate that, how we have high intensity periods, and how we have off time as well. Over the last 3.5 years, so 3 years, just before January, I wasn't going on any holidays. I wasn't allowing myself to spend money because I was so focused on the business. This year, I've made a real conscious effort. I've booked like 5 holidays, just weekends away to Europe to see friends. And I've done one of them already. I've got another one coming up in about 3 weeks. And I am so excited. Like I'm so excited to see friends that I've not seen in a year, 3 years. So where can we give ourselves that permission to actually have some downtime? And like you said, start feeling into the body. What are our needs that are being met? What do we want to make a request of from our partners, from our families?
Well, to be honest, that's why I started the men's camp. It was purely selfish.
Yeah.
I was like, I like camping. I'm going camping.
And I like men.
And I like hanging out with them. Yeah. And then we do one-nighters. I do a one-nighter most months. And then the months where I'm not doing that, it's probably because I'm doing the quarterly. And the quarterly is like in Wales. I love Wales. Beautiful place.
Yeah.
So dramatic. Just get out into the middle of nowhere, stay in a barn, stay in a bothy, climb the mountain, simple, cooking on a fire, jump in some cold water, do some deep work.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
I find it as healing as for me, as everyone else who comes on it. So it doesn't really feel like work. It's crazy.
Yeah, 100%. And I think nature is such a huge thing as well that we don't explore and that is actually missing from our day-to-day lives. I think we intellectualize life so much and we forget that we are a part of nature. We're meant to sleep more in the winter. We're meant to eat root vegetables. We're meant to eat fruit in the summer. We're meant to follow these different cycles and trends of high and low, of lots of energy and low energy. But that's not what society wants. It wants us to perform, to produce, to give constantly without end. And it's like, no wonder we feel exhausted and overwhelmed and burnt out. But when we get into nature, we have a huge change of environment. Like you said, the land, the water, the air, the sun, they all affect us and have a calming effect and help us to regulate our nervous system whilst being in community with other men.
It's all you need. I literally, my girlfriend the other day, she was like, "Don't you just want to socialize? Do you want to go to the pub with some of my friends?" And I was like, "Well, not really, to be honest." And she was like, "Yeah, but you need to, socialize a bit more with some. We need to socialize a couple." And I was like, I actually don't feel like I need that anymore. Like, I really genuinely don't, because of the camps I go on. And then she was like, "Yeah, but that's work." I was like, "Well, it is, but it isn't at the same time. Like, it's deep, deep connection, and it's way deeper than I'll have at the pub with anyone. And now, if you want me to come to the pub to be with you, and we go as a couple, and fair enough, that's different. But I actually don't really want to go. I don't feel like it's going to give me anything by going,
Yeah.
because it's going to be loud. It's going to be surface level conversation. Everyone's a bit drunk. It's going to be. It's just, I don't know. I just don't like it, and it's just funny. I don't really genuinely don't feel like I miss it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm the same. Very much the same. No. It's interesting, isn't it? Just this process of becoming, growing up, becoming a man, becoming a parent, business owner, partner, of just realizing, actually, what do you want? It's connection. Yeah. It's a sense of self. It's how do you want to live day to day? How do you want to feel day to day and be in relationship with people?
Way more important. Yeah. And watching the Manosphere thing, I thought it was going to be funny. And I was just sad, and like a bit sad, and I don't know. I felt as though there was a huge task, bigger than I realized, to get get back from it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all so curated, I just, because I can imagine people hearing us speak and go, "Yeah, but there are guys who are crushing it all the time, and there are guys who are having a great life." And I'm like, yeah, just watch the Manosphere and just see how curated it is.
Yeah.
It's fake. You're believing a lie.
It's just like social media, isn't it? They've got profiles of just showing the best moments of your life, the highlight reel, and actually what's going on behind that. What's the reality of being in a relationship, of how many hours you have to work a day, what it takes to earn that amount of money, to have that house, to have that car, to have that business, to have that level of power or influence. It takes so much time and energy. You and I see it all the time with the high performers that we work with. In business, they are crushing it. Relationships, they are on the brink. Their marriage, their relationships with their children, have they got any friendships? Generally not. There's so much which is sacrificed in order to do well in one area. You're naturally not going to do well in the other areas. And it's like, okay, what's my priority here? And, most of us want financial freedom or financial stability, but the payoff then is relationships. Not always, but I see a lot of that anyway. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, usually there's something which is bubbling away. Christian, I'm going to run out of time soon. It's been
so
a pleasure.
Good. It has been absolutely amazing. I've really enjoyed this conversation today, and we're going to link your websites into this as well, so people can find you, find out about the retreats that you're running, the coaching that you do. You already said you do quarterly excursions, and then you do monthly as well, you were saying.
Yeah. Quarterly goes usually to Wales, monthly down near Petersfield, South Downs way.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
amazing. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Christian. Lots of love.
Cheers, brother.